probably your mom did or your grandma. In fact, to tell you the truth, I think the reason that Stu asked me to get married was because I canned venison. Back in the old days when I worked at the sheriff's office, there were so many deer that were killed by cars. And the DNR would sell them for $5 a deer. And I started thinking, you know, others are buying it, you know, I should do it. So one evening I got a call that there was a deer that had been killed and did I want it? And I said, sure. I have no idea who's got it, who got it, but this big pumpkin thing appeared at my apartment. I had no idea how to cut it up. I had no idea what was, you know, what the steak part, the roast part, whatever. So I called everything venison steak. But my knives weren't good, so I had a lot of little pieces. So I thought, okay, I bet you if I can can that, that would work. So I went out and I bought some pint jars, and I stuck it in the jars and did the salt and a little bit of water in it. And I'm sure that I had small kettles, so it was maybe 3 little pints at a time. And Stu came down and saw me doing it. You know what? It wasn't too many weeks later when he brought the diamond. So I'm sure that's how it happened. Canning's been around for many years. In fact, Napoleon was one of the first ones who got going on it. He was so worried about his army troops and thinking, how can we have good food for them and how can we preserve the food? So he put out a decree, or whatever they did in those days, in the 18th century, that if somebody would come up with a way of preserving food, he would give them cash. There was a guy by the name of, I believe, Nicholas Appert, that started working on this, and it took about 15 years. But he discovered that if you could can or put your wine in bottles, you'd be able to do the same thing with food. Well, that worked. But then there was an Englishman, and his name was Durand. And he figured that it would be better, instead of using glass jars, to use tin cans. So he was the one that was the first to discover how to put the food in the tin, put the covers on, and it was sealed. And after that, I think somewhere in the early 1800s, the first canning factory was started, and that was in England. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about a different kind of a canner. This Stu and I discovered about 1.5 years ago. We were visiting some friends at Sandy Shores, and they had jelly and juice all over the place. And we said, that really looks great. And they said, we've got this neat equipment that doesn't take any work at all. So we looked at it. Stu went home and he ordered it right away. It comes in 3 parts, or 3 main parts. The first one is where you put the water, and you put the water up to the rim. And the second part is a funnel. And what happens with this, the water, the steam goes up through the funnel, and that's what gets the fruit to be steamed. It also has the hose, it's got a clamp, and it's got a plug. I think after being in law enforcement all these years, I think it kind of looks like a doper thing. But it works. So you put that on top. The next part, the third part, is the steamer itself. And it's quite deep. There's several sizes that you can get. But you put that on, and if I were to do apples, I would just take these stems off, wash them, and put the cover on, and that's all you do. Unless you wanted to put your sugar, your salt and pepper, or whatever you're cooking in the fruit and the veggies, you can just scatter that on top. And then all of that, the herbs, the spices, whatever, goes right into the juice also. So if we had steamed this, and that's been steamed for maybe 1.5 hours, you can tell that it's done when the fruit turns white, or just very pale, so then you know everything is out of there. Then what you do, I'm going to just pretend that this is juice. apples. I did them. I was able to. I put the sugar right in it. And there's enough in there.
You plug it in or anything? Or do you plug it in or how does it?
On the stove.
On the stove.
Do you do it on a medium heat?
Medium high.
Medium high.
And you guys, you really got to watch that heat. This last fall, I was busy at work, came home, and I had so many tomatoes to do. And I put the water in. You know, when we first got it, Stu said, don't ever forget the water. You got to check the water. And I thought, how dumb. I can for all these years, I know that. So this fall, I wish he would have warned me too, because I was so busy and trying to rush it. So I put the tomatoes in, and then I would just use this, and I would put the juice right into another kettle, so I was making V8 juice, and I needed to add the spices and stuff. So I kept adding and adding and adding, and not realizing that there was no water left. And because it's so tight, you don't smell it until it's too late, and I ruined the whole kettle of juice. So it's important that you keep that in. But if this were the apples and that had sugar in it and it was ready to go, you have to make sure your jars are hot, you know, and you just go like that, drain your juice in, and you are done. You seal it, and you don't have to do anything else.
You don't have to boil the whole water
No,
down?
because the juice is already boiled.
So
You just boil your lids and put
Yeah,
them
you
on there
boil the
spin
lids.
tight,
Yeah,
because that liquid is hot.
yeah,
And it auto sucks down for you? Nice.
yeah. It's great. So I gotta tell
So
you,
what does this cost you? Or us?
I think it's about $150 for the size. So it's expensive, but you know, I think that we are so busy that it's just nice to have something that's makes life a little bit simpler.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you the story about these lids, and you have to make sure that they say you should heat them for about 10 minutes before you use them. My youngest daughter started canning a couple years ago. That girl canned everything. She'd buy peaches and pears, and she would do potatoes and everything in her garden. And she was so proud of it. She didn't have a canner. She was doing the 3 pints in the kettle, so it took forever. Last summer she called and she said, "You're not going to believe what the extension office said in Bismarck." And she was disgusted. I said, "What?" "They say you have to have new lids every year." "You don't do that, do you, Mom?" I said, "You don't have to do that." I said, "I think they're just trying to sell, you know?" And it bothered me. And later I called her and I said, "Are you talking lids or rings?" I was thinking rings. And I said, "Yes, you have to replace your lids every year." She said, "I've been so careful. I wash the jars, I wash the lids, I put it on, and I use it." She had used the same lids for 5 years. So her stuff got thrown out.
What's
But
the
you know,
problem?
But sometimes they will seal.
she said they sealed, but you know, you can't really trust it either.
Well, if there's a leak in them, they'll come unsealed, so.
Yeah.
But I have used on jellies and jams, I
Have you?
have reused,
My
My
mother-in-law
lids.
swears that you can reuse them as long
because
as
I
they
boil
seal.
them,
My
as
mom-
long as they seal. I mean, because if there's a leak in them, they won't seal. So, you know, I have used them a couple of times.
Frozen peas.
But they have put some good rubber on some of them, but
Yeah,
some of them are
some.
really cheap.
Yeah. I think one of the greatest thing about this is that when you have got your juice and you're going to start your next batch, of course, you check the water, but this is full of yuck. And you don't, if I was going to do these apples, I'd cut them smaller just to cook faster.
You take the peelings out too, or?
No way. And then you have something smaller like crab apples or something, you wash them, take the stems out, and you put it in. And you don't have to worry about any of the seeds or anything. All that stuff, the crud is left in here.
How long do you cook it on the stove then?
It depends. In the book it tells you, but it's over an hour.
And the
It
book
just
has
keeps-
recipes too?
It has recipes, yeah. But then, this is full of crud, and you just, garbage can, you dump it out, and you're done. And if any of you have used this equipment over the years, you know, the mess.
Yeah.
It is so neat. I should have looked at the book before I came, but you can do meats in here, you can do puddings, so the English plum pudding. Anything that you want to have steamed, you can use this equipment.
So what do you do with the meat?
I wouldn't use that for the meat.
No,
Did you say meats or meats?
For meat, for steaming.
yeah.
You wouldn't be canning that, you would just, for the table.
Oh.
Some recipes call for steamed.
Gotcha.
Use it for, it's too big, but, you know, if you were going to steam veggies for
Yeah.
something. They do have different sizes. So, anyway,
What's
it's,
your favorite thing you've done so far? Juice
Oh.
size.
I think it has to be the V8. I really like that. The first year we had so many grapes, and I, again, didn't have time. So what I did is just do the juice, and then I canned the juice, so that later on I can make it into jelly or the juice or whatever. And I gave a demonstration at church here last fall, and I had samples of the grape juice, and I didn't like it. I thought it was too tart. But you know, as I was thinking about it, when you make other juices, you have the water that's poured on it, so it is kind of thinned out. But this is really the potent stuff, so I would think that 1 quart would make a lot of
Yeah, because you're gonna add water to it.
yeah, and I haven't done that. But the tomatoes, and I always, I do the tomatoes in there, I put the celery and the onions and things in here. But then it goes into a roaster, a big roaster, and I just leave the little hose here right in that roaster, and it drips out when it gets to be a certain weight. And then you can add all the different spices that you want
Into the roaster.
into the roaster, and then you can taste it. That's, yeah, so that works out well. But I think that when I have more time, now when I retire, it'll be fun to just work with it and see what else we can do.
What's the brand name of that thing?
I don't really know.
Oh, okay.
I've got it in the kitchen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So neat.
So
And is this the largest size?
I kind of think so. Stu likes to can too. So he makes a lot of jellies.
So if you're doing apples, like how many apples would fit in one batch? Let's say you're gonna do one batch. How many apples can you fit up in there? Like that size of those,
This
right?
size? Oh
Probably
goodness.
a lot.
Yeah.
A dozen?
This is 5.
Oh,
You know, so
lots
there's
of
a lot.
Can you fit?
Oh, you could. Yeah.
Can you fit a dozen?
Probably.
You know, yeah, pretty close, I bet. Yeah.
And if you cut them up, you'd have.
And you cut them up, you get more. Yeah.
And those crab apples that you always have to,
Yeah.
those are so good. Boy.
You could probably get 100 of
I
those.
bet you we could. I bet you we could.
So, any questions?
So you use this for the juice, and then you make your jelly with the juice that you.
Right.
How do you do that?
Make your jelly.
Yeah.
Just like the Sure Gel box says.
Sugar, yeah, it's a Sure Gel box that I use,
Yeah.
and it gives the instructions, and it's a sugar, and it's a Sure Gel, and the juice, and it tells how many minutes.
And if you
So
don't,
once you have
and
the
if you
juice,
don't
you
want to
can-
use that much sugar, then you use 2 boxes of Sure Gel and cut the sugar in half.
Yeah.
Do you think it could be less money?
You know something, I think that it costs quite a bit of money to do that, but I think sometimes when we look at our time and how much time that the moms have, sometimes it pays off.
And it's so much more healthy.
Very healthy, because you're not getting any
Yeah.
extra food, you're getting
Preservatives.
just this food to veggie.
Cool.
So if you'd like to come and have a sample of that V8, it's a little bit spicy. And I did add a can of just plain tomato juice to it to try to get rid of some of the spiciness, but I don't know if you like that, but come help yourself.